All right, we are back here. March Madness is well underway. We are through the first round. Sweet 16 is set. Last year we did this. I ripped my bracket in half. I don't have to do this this year because I'm still doing pretty well. But with the again to break it all down, we had some fun last week previewing the bracket. Troy Mauriello is here. Troy, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Mike. My bracket's not looking as good as yours. I thought Duke would make a little bit of a run, and they kind of let me down. But hanging in there, I guess, in terms of the bracket. But entertaining weekend of games, of course. Like we said, a lot of close games. Maybe not some great finishes, but a lot of really close, good games between really good teams. Couple of upsets. Really the nice mixture of everything that you want with March Madness. Some top teams get knocked out. Purdue, Kansas. A couple make it through. So we kind of have a nice mixture of the Cinderella type teams. I don't know if you call FAU a Cinderella, but Princeton for sure. And then, of course, the awesome matchups, Gonzaga, UCLA, games like that. So I'm really looking forward to the next weekend of March Madness for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to knock on a little wood here because I do have all four of my Final Four and seven of the Elite Eight still in the bracket. So, I know that means it's probably going to go horribly wrong in the next 4 days, but while I still have it, I can take the South. I got the most projected points left in the pool.
Yeah, and that's impressive because I mean, in a year where you did see, I think only maybe 9 of the top 16 seeds that the NCAA seeded actually made it through to the Sweet 16. Like that's an impressive accomplishment for sure. There was a lot of upsets, like we mentioned, the big one with Kansas and then Purdue. Although I think everyone kind of thought Purdue was getting knocked off early at some point. But yeah, that's definitely impressive.
Yeah, we did up Purdue. We were just around early.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, and I thought honestly, I thought Memphis was going to be the one to knock them out, and I was wrong about that. Obviously, FAU beat Memphis, and then Purdue gets knocked out. But yeah, I think we somehow even overrated Purdue if that was possible because we weren't really giving them any props, and then they still somehow came short of expectations.
Yeah, they certainly did here. And I will also point out the one team I did not get in the Elite Eight was Duke because I was right there with you. I thought Duke was going pretty far. And then they just got throttled by Kentucky and by Tennessee. And they did not get much help in that game because they got mugged that entire game.
Oh, they did, yeah. And Tennessee just beat them up physically. I mean, 52 points on that Duke team. Tennessee, really they cut down on the turnovers, which was a big problem with them with Zakai Ziegler out. They just bullied them for sure, and that I did not see that coming. I thought Duke was going to roll Tennessee actually because Tennessee had not been playing great, and Duke winners of 10 in a row. That kind of shows you in March. It's just so hard to predict what's going to actually happen in these games. I thought Duke was just going to basically roll to the Final Four, especially when you look at Purdue getting knocked off. I thought they'd be going to the Garden and winning a couple games in the Garden in an East region that is not very strong. You saw Marquette get knocked out as well, so you have the top two seeds out of that region. I thought Duke was going to roll, and they just, like I said, it's just so hard to predict March. It's so hard to really take what you see in the last couple of weeks of the season and then apply that to this tournament. Like we said, Duke was rolling through the ACC tournament and then they lay a stinker. I guess they were due for one.
Yeah, that's for sure here. Before we get deeper into the March, though, we got some coaching news to get to here. The carousel's in full motion here. I mean, I see you repping the St. John swag on the Zoom call here, so you could talk a little bit about what it means that Rick Pitino has chosen to drive about 30 minutes south from Wingfoot to start coaching there.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute game changer. It's been known now for about a week. I think that it was likely going to happen, but this was a St. John's program and school that has really been irrelevant. Not only on a national scale but even on a local scale for basically the past 2 decades. Haven't won an NCAA tournament game since 2000. They've only been to 3 NCAA tournaments in that span. They haven't been to the NCAA tournament since 2019. Like this was a program that needed a jolt, and they kind of knew if they didn't make the right hire in this cycle, after not really hitting on Steve Lavin, after failing miserably with Chris Mullen, and then really failing again with Mike Anderson. If they didn't hit a home run in this hiring cycle, it could have gotten really dark for them. They needed to just make the big splash, and they did so. Rick Pitino was that guy. I think of all the available coaches out there, Rick Pitino is the one that I think you could say with certainty is going to bring you back to prominence. Maybe not on a national level, but you should compete for Big East titles now. You should be a regular in the NCAA tournament for the next couple of years, and then you hope whoever Pitino passes that down to 5-6 years down the road, hopefully can continue that. So I think in terms of someone to get the St. John's back on track, you can't go wrong with Rick Pitino. The money that's going to be coming in through NIL, through boosters like Mike Rapoli, who is now going to be donating more money to the program. It's just a game-changing hire, and I'm shocked that they actually did it because if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago if they were going to make this move, I would have said absolutely not. It seemed like it moved very, very quickly, and I think they got the right guy, and hopefully some winning follows.
Yeah, I mean, from what I gather, he's bringing the whole staff with him from Iona over there. So it sounds like that, like you got like options for you have a coach in waiting, whether Steve Masiello, the former Manhattan coach, Talik Brown,
Mm-hmm.
the UConn system. I mean, there's options on that staff for a long-term succession plan. But I think also they had to do this, I mean, especially now with the flack they're gonna get with the Mike Anderson lawsuit, he's suing them for. Apparently, they're trying to fire him with cause so that they don't have to pay the
Mm-hmm.
buyout. So like that's a mess. And I think like at that point, Patino kind of had him over a barrel. Just they kind of had to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, yeah, and allegedly he didn't really want to move too far from where he lived, and I think that really worked out for St. John's because, of course, if Rick Pitino is 20 years younger, even with these past allegations that he's had to deal with, he's probably going wherever he wants to go. It's a school that can pay him a lot more, that has a lot more facilities already in place than St. John's. It was really a perfect mix for St. John's to get this opportunity to hire Patino at this stage in his life and in his career. And they rightfully took advantage of it. And now, like I said, hopefully, you can make your way back into the NCAA tournament now and just become relevant because, I've never experienced St. John's being relevant, like I said, not even on the national scale, but on the local scale. They have not really been a relevant program. No tournament win since 2000, like I mentioned. So hopefully this is the hire that gets them to that place.
Yeah, it certainly does here. And then in terms of another Big East hire, I'll mention real quick before you talk about what happens in Iona next year. Ed Cooley jumping from Providence to Georgetown. Like that one seems like
Mm-hmm.
shocking, especially considering like I can't remember the last time a Big East school poached a coach from another Big East school.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like something that I can remember at least, and especially in the Big East, a smaller, not a mid-major conference, but certainly not on the level of the power conferences like the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the SEC. We've seen it happen with some of those conferences, but not in the Big East yet. Yeah, very surprising move by Ed Cooley. I was pretty shocked by it, to be honest with you. I didn't think it had any legs, and then here we are talking about Ed Cooley to Georgetown. Listen, if there's someone to resurrect a program, Ed Cooley did that, did just that in Providence. It took him a couple of years, but he turned Providence into a perennial NCAA tournament contender. He probably felt like, if I'm just guessing here, he probably felt like he kind of hit that ceiling in Providence where, what else can he do there? They're in the NCAA tournament 4 of every 5 years, let's say. They made the Sweet 16 last year, but he's probably saying, I don't know if I'll ever be able to maybe compete on a national scale, and make, Final Fours with Providence, even though they do have really good facilities. I'm sure he probably said that to himself. And Georgetown, they've been down in the dumps now for the last couple of years under Patrick Ewing, but they do have that money, that capital, those resources to give Ed Cooley what he needs to maybe become a national player.
Yeah, I'm gonna call this shot also here. We're getting a Georgetown Providence CBS game on CBS next season.
Yeah, that will be the Big East game of the week for sure. Ed Cooley's going to need a lot of security whenever he does return to Providence. Going to hear a lot of boos, I'm sure, heading back to that campus because he was like a son to that city. They really took him, and I believe he's from that area. He seemed like after he was in contention for the Michigan job a couple of years ago, like he was going to be at Providence for life. So him leaving was just a shock, and leaving for a Big East school, no less, and Georgetown, which is kind of, I don't want to say a step down because it's not, but almost a lateral move at this point, even more shocking. So some crazy stuff going on in the Big East right now.
Yeah, and we'll go back to Iona for a second because obviously they got the Phil Patino shoes. Obviously, you're never gonna get a coach of that caliber like in this cycle here, but they do have some interesting options. So like some of the early names linked to that job here, Tobin Anderson from Fairleigh Dickinson interviewed there before they hired Patino, and he obviously now his stock is sky high. Jared Grasso, who used to be an assistant there under Cluis at, now he took Brian to the NCAA tournament last year after they won one game 3 years prior. You got some other guys in the mix here. Kamani Young, the assistant at UConn, Rob Jones at Norfolk State. I feel like this is a good pool of them they're pulling from.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think when you look at Iona, they have in place such a great structure and a great program. They've built such a winning culture there, of course, with Tim Cluess and now with Rick Pitino. Pitino, that whoever is coming there, this is not a big rebuild job, where you're looking at a guy to kind of, change the course of the program, kind of like St. John's and Georgetown, all right? You're looking at a guy who you just kind of want to continue the flow. You would assume that they're not going to recruit at the level that Pitino recruited, but a guy like Tobin Anderson, who just took an FDU team with way less talent than Iona, and won an NCAA tournament, won two NCAA tournament games, and beat a number one seed. Someone like that would certainly be a good idea. But I think Iona is at an advantage, like I mentioned, that they don't need someone that is going to completely turn the program around. They just need someone that's going to kind of steady the course now and keep the ship moving in the right direction, which it has really for the past decade or so under Tim Clues, under Rick Pitino. So I think that's where they have an advantage.
Yeah, so that's the coaching front. So that's what's going on right there. Here. Now let's get to this tournament here. In terms of the big shocks here, the opening week. I'll talk about a few here. I mean, we got to start with Purdue here because Purdue going out to Fairleigh Dickinson, like a team that had to come out of the first four, was just like literally like mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a team that even shouldn't have even been there. They didn't win their conference tournament. They only made it because who was it? Merrimack or someone was not eligible for the NCAA tournament. They shouldn't have even been there. They're the shortest team in Division I. Purdue obviously has Zach Edey, who's going to be the Player of the Year. And he doesn't take a shot in the final 12 minutes of the game. Just crazy, mind-boggling about Purdue. But it's like we said, they were a one-man team the entire season. They needed someone else to step up, and in that game, when Edey was not scoring and not really shooting in the last couple of minutes of that game, no one else stepped up for Purdue. It's exactly like we said was going to happen. We did hit the nail on the head with that one. It's just, it's a team that did not have I thought the pieces around the Player of the Year to really make a run. No one saw them losing in the first round, but I'm fairly confident that even if they would have gone past Fairleigh Dickinson, they were not going to beat FAU. So they just didn't have it. I thought they were the weakest of the one seeds, and I thought they were one of the weaker one seeds that we've seen in recent memory.
Yeah, I mean that team. Like you watch these guys play that game on Friday. Mm-hmm. on was it Friday night they played? I think
Friday night. Yeah,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were scared shitless to shoot the ball down the stretch. The only guy who was like actually looked like he wanted the ball in his hands was Fletcher Loyer. And there multiple times in the program, I think it was like Steve Laz saying like these guys look scared to shoot. Like that's not a place you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a 1 seed against a 16 seed. And it should be so simple, right? Just get the ball to Zach Edey and make him work. But I thought Fairleigh Dickinson in that game just did an awesome job kind of denying him the ball, knocking the ball out of his hands, getting traffic in the paint around him when he did get touches on the ball in those final couple of minutes. And yeah, Purdue just absolutely panicked. They had not, I don't think they had dealt with something like that before. And just, again, credit to Tobin Anderson and Fairleigh Dickinson for a really good game plan. He called his shot 2 nights before that, saying, the more he sees Purdue, the more he thinks they can beat them. I think that, the national media and people like us watching games thought Purdue was the most vulnerable of the 1 seeds. Like I said, I don't think we thought that they were going to go down to a 16 seed, but they definitely seemed vulnerable, and they got caught right away.
Yeah, it's also not a good run for Matt Painter of late. I mean, in the bubble, they lose in the first round, North Texas, 13 seed. Mm-hmm. Last year, they lose to a 15 seed, St. Peter's, when he doesn't put his 2 bigs on the floor at the same time. This year, they lose to a 16. So Matt Painter's not having a good run here.
No, yeah, and when you're a head coach that is consistently in the NCAA tournament, but you're consistently losing games that you are. I think they were an 8-point favorite, a 13-point favorite, and a 20-something point favorite. When you're losing those games, at some point, you got to do some soul searching as a program and say, like, what's going wrong here? Because, it's not working out. These were 3 straight Purdue teams that probably felt like they should have been, well, I know last year they were a second weekend team, should have been making deep runs into March. And they were knocked out by 3 double-digit seeds, a 16 seed this year, a 15 seed last year. They've had an incredible success in the regular season, getting to the NCAA tournament and becoming a factor in the NCAA tournament, but it just has not translated over. And like I said, at some point, you got to look into your program and say, like, what is going on here? How can we change this? I don't think that you move on from the guy, of course, but I think at some point, the writing might be on the wall if this continues next year, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let's go to Kansas also here. I mean, Kansas not had Bill Self either game of the tournament. He's still recovering from the medical issue that sidelined him during the Big 12 tournament. During the Big 12 tournament, mm-hmm. They win the first game. They struggle with Howard for a little bit. They get by it. They lose to Arkansas. They get bounced out here. Like, what do you think about how Kansas goes out?
Yeah, I just think it was tough timing for Kansas, to be honest with you. Tough matchup with Arkansas, who wasn't playing great coming in, but Arkansas I thought played a really, really good game against them. And I just think not having Bill Self might have hurt them as well. The timing of that, losing him during the Big 12 tournament and not having a whole lot of time. A lot of this, predicting the NCAA tournament and who's going to make a run kind of comes down to, when are you kind of hit with the injury bug or with the, unforeseen circumstances with Kansas. Obviously with Bill Self, it was probably, for his own good that he was not away from the team and recovering, but, they didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare without him, and to figure it out and to kind of get into a flow without him. I think I saw someone bring up a good point. Xavier lost Zach Fremantle earlier in the season. They had, 10 games to kind of get to figuring out how to play without him, how to gel without him. I know that's a player compared to a coach, but I think it's kind of the same thing here with Bill Self. Kansas didn't have a whole lot of time. When they lost Bill Self, it was going into their conference tournament. They didn't have a whole lot of time to kind of figure out who they were going to be without their head coach. And I just think that's really tough for a young or a team of college kids, 19, 20-year-olds to kind of figure out how we're going to play without our leader who's been leading us now for the past 6 months. And for some of these guys, last couple of years, it's tough for those guys to figure out how to play without him. So, good job by them getting through the first game, but unfortunately, their run comes to an end against Arkansas.
Yeah, and Arkansas is a team you don't want to see in an 8-9 game. Like, this team is highly talented. I mean, they were top 10 at one point this season here. They just hadn't got it together. The talent was always there. They just had to put it together for one game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they play a UConn team that, also at some point this season was top 10. I think, we're seeing, UConn, Arkansas, Creighton, who was preseason top 10. These teams had the talent. Like these teams, they were lower seeds. Obviously, Creighton as a 6 seed, UConn as a 4, and then Arkansas as an 8. These teams were lower seeded, but they've all had, either preseason expectations of being top 10 teams or at some point during the season being top 10 teams. It's surprising seeing them making runs now. Yes. But obviously, with where they were ranked at some point this season, the talent was all there for all of those teams.
Yeah, absolutely here. And I mean, in terms of, KenPom especially, I mean, UConn's number 4 team on KenPom going to turn. They were a 4 seed. And like, if you're poor Iona, looking, you're like, what do we do to deserve that draw?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I follow KenPom a lot too. And yeah, that's a UConn team. The talent is there. The depth is there with UConn. They got, I think, 4 or 5 guys off the bench that can kill you. Seeing them in person in the Big East tournament a couple of weeks ago, they just rotate through guys, and it seems like everyone on their team can hit a shot, can come off the bench and hit a shot. Adama Sanogo was just putting up video game numbers in those in their first 2 games against Iona and then against St. Mary's. So if he keeps playing like that offensively, they're going to be so hard to beat because they have the outside shooting. If they can get the ball inside to him and Klingon, the freshman, they are really, really tough to beat. I think that they actually have a pretty decent draw now. I think that they can, facing Arkansas, like I mentioned, they're a talented team, but you'd still rather face Arkansas than Kansas. And then we'll see what happens with Gonzaga, UCLA. I think UConn is a really, really good pick to make a Final Four.
Yeah, so here, one more big dog went down here. Talking about here, Arizona losing to Princeton here, and like this is a team I was not very thrilled with all year at Arizona because they seem to have issues with, like, elite guard play. The defense let them at times here, but still losing to Princeton. I mean, that's a little much even for them.
Yeah, for sure. And it's another letdown for Arizona in the NCAA tournament when they go in as a high seed. I just think it's another example of you can't put too much stock into what these teams are doing in their conference tournaments. But I personally didn't even think Arizona looked that great in the Pac-12 tournament, especially in the final against UCLA. That was a UCLA team that was struggling with injuries and guys fouling out in that game, and Arizona still barely got by them. I didn't think it was a very strong South region outside of the 1 seed, Alabama. You look at the other seeds in that region: Baylor the 3, Virginia the 4, and San Diego State the 5. It was not a very strong region in terms of the top 5 seeds. So I thought Arizona might have a shot to maybe make a run to a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8. But again, they win their conference tournament. But it's just hard to put too much stock into that, and they didn't look so great doing so. So obviously surprising that they fell to the 15 seed, but maybe Princeton was a little bit better than we thought, obviously, because they just dismantled Missouri in their next game.
Yeah, also Arizona playing here lost 5 times outside of quad 1 games this year, so like they shouldn't be surprised they just didn't show up for a game, and then that's what happens to some of these teams that do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's go quickly here. Winners and losers the first game. Give me a winner from this first weekend, besides the obvious ones like Fairleigh Dickinson and Princeton.
Okay, yeah, I got one. Michigan State.
Yep.
Big time winner for me. I actually thought this. I believe that you thought it as well, that they had a good chance at making a run here. You know, they take down USC in a game that wasn't really that close, and then they kind of surge past Marquette. Again, a Marquette team that looks so good in winning the Big East tournament, and then it just doesn't translate over to the NCAA tournament. But this is just what Tom Izzo does in March. He was due for one of these. They believe they lost pretty early last year, so they were due for like a random Sweet 16 run. It felt like, and you know they got a Kansas State team that I think is another winner of this weekend. To be honest, with their win over Kentucky, a game that they were underdogs in, that's a really fun matchup. And the fact that one of those two teams now is going to be playing for the right to go to a Final Four on I believe Saturday.
Yeah.
I think Michigan State, you know, they really impressed me this weekend, especially with that game over Marquette.
Yeah, I think in terms of Michigan State, I'll point out here, I mean, this is like a classic Tom Izzo job here. I've mentioned this like on several like written articles here. 25-7 is his record when he has less than 48 hours to get ready for an opponent in the NCAA tournament, which is just absolutely absurd. He's in his CBS also put on the graph on the broadcast weekend. 16 wins, most all time when as the lower seed in the NCAA tournament. It's not easy to do. I mean, you're the lower seed for a reason here, and he does a great job getting these teams ready to game. I agree with you. Whoever wins that K-State Michigan State game, I think comes out of that region.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, I really like the story of FAU as well, making the Sweet 16 for the first time. They obviously got a really good draw. They could have lost that game to Memphis, to be honest with you, and then they get the 16 seed FDU. But yeah, I do think that the winner of K-State, Michigan State gets through. But yeah, that's just what Tom Izzo does. And you looked at that kind of bottom half of that region, and you said, you know, Marquette playing them in the second round. I didn't think Marquette was this unbeatable 2 seed like maybe UCLA and Texas were. That was a really good draw for Michigan State, and they took advantage of it.
Yeah, I think my big winner for the weekend here, I think, is I'm going to go with the Big East as a whole because, I mean, aside from the off-court stuff here, I mean, UConn looked brilliant. Creighton looked like a Final Four contender here. Xavier looked as good as they've been in a long time. Even Marquette played very hard in that game. They lost Michigan State. The only one at this point was Providence. So Big East had a good week.
Yeah. I mean, if Marquette closes that game out against Michigan State, the Big East puts basically a quarter of the teams in the Sweet 16 right now are from the Big East, but still they put in three, and I think all three have a legitimate shot here. Xavier maybe less so because I think Texas is really good, but you know, UConn against Arkansas and then Creighton against the 15 seed Providence. The Big East has a shot to put maybe two or even possibly all three of their teams into the Elite Eight now for a conference that, you know, just continues to grow and get better and just continues to make noise in March. You know, usually it's Villanova doing so. This year we have UConn returning to the fold, Creighton making another run, and Xavier kind of returning after a couple of years rough. So yeah, really good weekend for the Big East.
Let's go the way. Who was the loser of the weekend?
Ooh, you know, I'm gonna go a little bit off the beaten path here because there's some obvious ones. Obviously, the 1 seed is going down, Arizona. One that I kind of feel like I thought would maybe make a little bit more of a run was Memphis. They lose that tough game to FAU. I really thought I thought they were going to win that game, and then you know I thought they were going to beat Purdue, frankly, and go to the Sweet 16. If they would have won that game, they would have gotten Fairleigh Dickinson, and I'm fairly confident that they would have won that game against FDU and gone to the Sweet 16, and then had a matchup with Tennessee. Just feels like a missed opportunity for Memphis. I know that's not, you know, the traditional ones of, you know, a big upset or anything like that, but man, that would have been a really nice job for Penny Hardaway to win the conference tournament. And then if they were able to just close that game out against FAU, I think that they could have had a really shot at an Elite Eight and maybe even at a Final Four this year. So that's just, I don't want to say a loser because they lost a close game. They were, you know, an 8-9 game, but I just feel like that's such a missed opportunity for them.
Yeah, I'll throw two out there in terms of loser category. One is Virginia, which obviously loses to a Furman team that gets blitzed in the second round by San Diego State, which is not a good look for Virginia. Yeah. And the other one, the Big Ten, as always, because they sent 8 teams to tournament. They got one left. It's Izzo.
I like with the Big Ten. I faded the Big Ten at every chance I got. You know, with the Big Ten, it's I come to expect it now. It's nothing surprising me with them. Every year, the Big Ten is going to get 8, 9, 10 teams in, and you're going to look up, like you said, in the Sweet 16, they're going to have 1 or 2 teams left. It's just how it goes with them. They're consistently overrated every single year, and this year was no different.
Yeah, Indiana getting like shot at the floor at Miami is not a good look either.
Yeah, an Indiana team that I actually thought they were going to get knocked off by Kent State.
Yep.
I felt less and less confident as that game got closer because it felt like everyone was saying that. But yeah, and then they turn and they just get run out of the gym by Miami last night.
Yeah, not a good look here. Let's look ahead now. Look at the Sweet 16. We'll go region by region here. We'll start on
Mm-hmm.
Thursday. Before I get to the actual matches here, do you like the time change here? They have changes now. So last year we were complaining, oh, the 7:40 game starts like the window too late, and the last game's 10:10. They have actually modified this. They may have listened to us last year. The first game is
Mm-hmm.
at 6:30 on Thursday. Then we
Yep.
have 6:30 and 9 in the New York pod, and 7:15 and 9:45 on the other one. I feel like schedule. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as someone who works an early morning shift and needs to go to bed early, that's a welcome change. I'll actually be able to watch a good portion of these games. Whereas, like you said, if they're starting at 10 o'clock, I'm probably tapping out after 10 minutes of the game.
Yep.
So I'll actually be able to watch. I am welcoming that change for sure.
Yeah, plus it's nice to start it earlier because I mean, like, what are we waiting for here? Why are we like
Yeah. Uh-huh.
burying that late game?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, especially the New York pod. Like let's 6:30 is perfect. Let's do that.
yeah. So we'll start here. The East and West pods are up here. First on Thursday,
Mm-hmm.
here, Michigan State, K State, Florida Atlantic, Tennessee. How do you feel about this pod?
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of a letdown in terms of the teams that are in it. When you look and, you could have had, Duke, I guess Purdue, Memphis, Kentucky, Michigan State, there's some big brands that could have possibly been playing in this. It's not the most sexy games in the world, FAU, Tennessee, and then K-State, Michigan State. But at the end of the day, I think it should be two pretty good games. Those are four teams that I don't think, I mean, really anyone or not a lot of people expected to be playing for a right to go to the Final Four. I know Kansas State has a 3 seed, I would say possibly, but those other 3 teams probably not so much. So you've got someone who's going to make this run and a miraculous run at that. We already talked about Izzo. I thought Kansas State was really impressive in their game against Kentucky. Tennessee we touched on as well, and FAU. This is kind of another test for FAU now against a really physical Tennessee team. So I'm not sure who I'd like to get out of that. I don't know if you can bet against Michigan State, to be honest with you. Kansas State's probably the favorite, but should be a couple of good games.
That Kansas State's actually the underdog in that game.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah, they have Michigan State favored by 2.
Wow, Kansas State's getting disrespected this whole tournament. Underdogs against Tennessee, and now underdogs again.
Yeah,
I might have to look into that one because that's odd.
Yeah, I feel like Jerome Tang has that circle and pinned to his bulletin board locker saying nobody respects us. Like we're underdogs.
Yeah.
It's a 6 and a 7. So like, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, they're playing these big brands and they're underdogs in every one.
Yep, absolutely. I think I think I agree with you here. I think whoever wins that game comes out of the region. Like I had K State, I'm going to stick with it. But as a guy who likes Sparty, I would be happy I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah. I think the winner of that one has a really good shot.
Yeah. The other pod here, the CBS pod, the West region here. Arkansas, UConn first, 7:15. Then Gonzaga, UCLA the game week. This region, like, if I could add the money to drop to fly to Vegas, buy tickets, and get a hotel and go out watch these games, I would definitely do it.
Yeah. This is absolutely my favorite pod of the upcoming weekend. Arkansas, UConn should just be an awesome game. Like I mentioned, 2 teams that have that top 10 talent that are probably a little bit underseeded for the talent that they have and for what some of the metrics say. Arkansas getting by Kansas, UConn just blitzing their first 2 opponents in Albany. That's going to be a really, really fun game. And then I think Gonzaga, UCLA is just the game of the tournament. 2 West Coast brands, 2 big time schools fighting for a chance to go to the Elite Eight. I really like UCLA. They just keep dealing with injuries and they just keep winning. The UCLA, they just have this adversity. They have these injuries and they keep winning. It's a Gonzaga team that has just totally flown under the radar so far. I feel like this entire season, obviously playing in the WCC helps that, but they have just totally flown under the radar. They're a 3 seed. Their first 2 games haven't been the most eventful in the world. They've been in that kind of late night spot both times. So this is going to be a really, really fun game. I am really looking forward to Gonzaga, UCLA. I like UCLA, but I also think UConn could get out of this region. I think it's going to be UConn, UCLA. I picked UConn, so I'll stick with that. But I really think that you can make a case for all 4 of these teams to go to the Final Four.
Yeah, I do have a future on UCLA to win the title, so I'm still happy about that one. They're in my Final Four, so I'm going to keep riding with that one. But I will point out here, Gonzaga, the thing I don't like about them is I don't think they have the kind of dynamic guard play you need to win in this tournament. I feel like that's going to be a big issue here against the team that defends as well as UCLA does.
Yeah, that's a good point. They are a little bit too reliant on guys like Drew Timme. They don't have those real playmakers like we've seen in years past with these Gonzaga teams, really over the last 2 years. So that could be a problem. But man, UCLA has just been so impressive to me, just fighting through all these injuries and still coming out and with relative ease making it through to the Sweet 16.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go to the South region. That kicks off Friday night on TBS. They're out in Louisville here. San Diego State, Alabama, Princeton, Creighton. These two games, I feel like, I end up being both blowouts, in my opinion.
I think so too. I agree with you 100%. I was going to mention, San Diego State. Listen, impressive to get there for sure. They beat a Charleston team that maybe was a little bit overseeded. They get by them, and then they run through a Furman team that, I think it's, like we said, it says more about Virginia that they lost that game to Furman in a game that just was never close. So San Diego State probably the beneficiary of maybe some seeding and some upsets. I think Alabama's going to cruise past them. Alabama's been really impressive. Obviously, their first game against the 16th seed, you throw that out. But against Maryland, that game was never really close. They kept them at an arm's length the entire way. And in a first and second round, where really all of the other one seeds, we're going to touch on Houston in a second. Houston was down 10 at the half. Kansas goes down. Purdue goes down in the first round. Some two seeds get knocked out as well, Arizona and Marquette. With all the one seeds struggling, Alabama's kind of rolled through this so far, and I think that they're definitely the favorite in this region. I think Creighton, like you said, will probably, with a couple of days, what's that, 4 days to game plan for Princeton, they probably roll past them. But Alabama Creighton should be a pretty good game if we get that. I do think that Alabama, though, is the pretty clear favorite here.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Princeton Creighton game, I think the thing that like a wise person once said, I forget who it was, said here, like, when you have two programs who play the same way, take the higher octane model. I feel like Princeton's like ultimate upside if they want to be Creighton, and Creighton is like the bigger, stronger version of that.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Yeah, Creighton's going to get up down the court, and 85 points against Baylor. That was an impressive game. I thought that Baylor team was a little bit too higher seeded than they should have been as well. But yeah, if it is Creighton and Alabama, I would really look forward to that in the Elite Eight.
Absolutely. Here, I'm going to the Midwest region, the last one, and I don't know if you saw this yet, but CBS is sending out Jim Nantz the last tournament. I let him call every Houston game he can possibly. That's the pot they sent him to.
Yeah. Just listen, with Nantz, obviously he's a legend, and Final Fours in Houston as well, so that works out for them. I think it's going to be a Houston homecoming, though. I picked them to win the whole thing, and I think that they get to the Final Four out of this region. I think that they're the best team, but I think that we're just in a collision course right now for a Houston, Texas Elite Eight game. That's going to be awesome. Really love Texas, what they did. Dylan Dessou was incredible in that game against Penn State down the stretch. Really just put them on his back and carried them in a game that they really could have lost. And I thought we learned a lot about Houston in that game, just absolutely torching Auburn in the second half, down by 10 at the half, and they win that game going away in the second half against a pretty solid Auburn team. Two really impressive games. I mean, you could really make the case that everyone in this region has won, or remaining in this region has won impressively going in, with Miami surging past Indiana, and then Xavier, getting by Pitt pretty easily as well. So everyone in this region is playing really, really solid basketball right now, but I just think Houston and Texas are the two best teams. I think that they're headed for a collision course, and I think it's going to be Houston in the end.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the sense here in terms of like these two teams. I think are very similar talent base, but I think the coaching edge with Kelvin Sampson, one of the best coaches in the country, has not won a title yet compared to interim Roddy Terry's done a great job there. I just think that's going to be the difference in that game.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and March is just, it's all about the storylines, with March Madness. And Kelvin Sampson, like we said, getting that title, Houston going home, kind of the culmination of a couple of years of really solid play for Houston, making the Final Four, then making the Elite Eight. It feels like it's the time for Houston, and it feels like for Houston, if it's not going to be now, to win a national title, when is it going to be? All the chips are aligning here. They had some injury concerns, obviously, but I think those are a little bit past them now with how they kind of responded in that second half against Auburn. So I think this is the time for Houston.
Yeah, and don't forget they're going to the Big 12 next year, so it's not going to be easy to pile the resume that they had as they did this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, that's a big thing to note as well.
Yeah, and we had to pick a Final Four today here. Who are you going with?
Okay, well, I'm going to stick with the teams that I predicted at the start. So I had Alabama, I had Houston, and I had UConn. So I'm going to stick with those three. And then in the East, I guess I'd go with Kansas State. I do, like what I said, I think the winner of that game makes it through. It's so hard to bet against Izzo, but man, Kansas State really impressed me with how they came back past Kentucky. And so I would go with Kansas State as my fourth team coming into the East.
Yeah, well, I mean, my bracket's not wrong yet, so I'm going to stick with what I
You got
had
to stick
here.
with it,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I had Alabama, Houston, UCLA, and K State. That's the Final Four prediction here. So we'll see how many of them actually make it through here, because I feel like good about the 2 1s. I'm not as sure about the other two teams.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think Houston and I think Alabama's going through. Houston could get picked off by Texas maybe, and yeah, that West region is so wide open because I really think any of those four teams could make a run.
I do feel bad for Creighton. I feel like if Creighton was any of the other threes, they could have get to the Final Four. I just don't think. I think the match with Alabama is bad for them.
I agree. Yeah, yeah. Alabama just I think Alabama is far and away the best team in the South.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, so Troy, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People want to go let you go, keep up with you on social media. Give us some of the stuff you're doing. How do they do that?
Yeah, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Troy Mauriello, TroyMauriello. Do the St. John's Seeing Red podcast. Might be bringing that back now at some point this week with the addition of Rick Pitino. Might have to get my thoughts out there on that. So definitely check that out if you're a St. John's fan.
Yeah, I'm assuming we're going to wait till after the press conference to get your thoughts on that.
Think so. Yeah, we're gonna hear what he has to say during the press conference. Maybe let the dust settle a little bit. Let me collect my thoughts because I'm still very emotional right now about this. So I got to collect my thoughts, and then yeah, maybe later in the week we'll have something coming out.
Yeah, sounds good, Troy. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, Mike.